Good morning. Thank you for joining me today. This morning we'll be in 2 Chronicles chapter 8, verse 11 through chapter 10, verse 19. Solomon moved Pharaoh's daughter up from the city of David to the palace he had built for her, for he had said, My wife must not live in the palace of King David of Israel, for the places where the ark of the Lord has entered are holy. Then Solomon offered burnt sacrifices to the Lord on the altar of the Lord which he had built in front of the temple's porch. He observed the daily requirements for sacrifices that Moses had specified for Sabbaths, new moon festivals, and 3 annual celebrations, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Feast of Weeks, and the Feast of Temporary Shelters. As his father David had decreed, Solomon appointed the divisions of the priests to do their assigned tasks, the Levitical orders to lead worship and help the priests with their daily tasks, and the divisions of the gatekeepers to serve at their assigned gates. This was what David, the man of God, had ordered. They did not neglect any detail of the king's orders pertaining to the priests, Levites, and treasuries. All the work ordered by Solomon was completed from the day the foundation of the Lord's temple was laid until it was finished. The Lord's temple was completed. Then Solomon went to Ezion-Geber and to Elat on the coast in the land of Edom. Hiram sent him ships and some of his sailors, men who were well acquainted with the sea. They sailed with Solomon's men to Ophir and took from there 450 talents of gold, which they brought back to King Solomon. When the queen of Sheba heard about Solomon, she came to challenge him with difficult questions. She arrived in Jerusalem with a great display of pomp, bringing with her camels carrying spices, a very large quantity of gold, and precious gems. She visited Solomon and discussed with him everything that was on her mind. Solomon answered all her questions. There was no question too complex for the king. When the queen of Sheba saw for herself Solomon's extensive wisdom, the palace he had built, the food in his banquet hall, his servants and attendants in their robes, his cupbearers in their robes, and his burnt sacrifices which he presented in the Lord's temple, she was amazed. She said to the king, The report I heard in my own country about your wise sayings and insight was true. I did not believe these things until I came and saw them with my own eyes. Indeed, I didn't hear even half the story. Your wisdom surpasses what was reported to me. Your attendants who stand before you at all times and hear your wise sayings are truly happy. May the Lord your God be praised because he favored you by placing you on his throne as the one ruling on his behalf. Because of your God's love for Israel and his lasting commitment to them, he made you king over them, so you could make just and right decisions. She gave the king 120 talents of gold and a very large quantity of spices and precious gems. The quantity of spices the queen of Sheba gave King Solomon has never been matched. Hiram's servants, aided by Solomon's servants, brought gold from Ophir, as well as fine timbers and precious gems. With the timber, the king made steps for the Lord's temple and royal palace, as well as stringed instruments for the musicians. No one had seen anything like them in the land of Judah prior to that. King Solomon gave the queen of Sheba everything she requested, more than what she had brought him. Then she left and returned to her homeland with her attendants. Solomon received 666 talents of gold per year, besides what he collected from the merchants and traders. All the Arabian kings and the governors of the land also brought gold and silver to Solomon. King Solomon made 200 large shields of hammered gold. 600 measures of hammered gold were used for each shield. He also made 300 small shields of hammered gold. 300 measures of gold were used for each of these shields. The king placed them in the palace of Lebanon forest. The king made a large throne decorated with ivory and overlaid it with pure gold. There were 6 steps leading up to the throne, and a gold footstool was attached to the throne. The throne had 2 armrests with a statue of a lion standing on each side. There were 12 statues of lions on the 6 steps, 1 lion at each end of each step. There was nothing like it in any other kingdom. All of King Solomon's cups were made of gold, and all the household items in the palace of Lebanon forest were made of pure gold. There were no silver items, for silver was not considered very valuable in Solomon's time. The king had a fleet of large merchant ships manned by Hiram's men that sailed the sea. Once every 3 years, the fleet came into port with cargoes of gold, silver, ivory, apes, and peacocks. King Solomon was wealthier and wiser than any of the kings of the earth. All the kings of the earth wanted to visit Solomon to see him display his God-given wisdom. Year after year, visitors brought their gifts, which included items of silver, items of gold, clothes, perfume, spices, horses, and mules. Solomon had 4,000 stalls for his chariot horses and 12,000 horses. He kept them in assigned cities and in Jerusalem. He ruled all the kingdoms from the Euphrates River to the land of the Philistines, as far as the border of Egypt. The king made silver as plentiful in Jerusalem as stones. Cedar was as plentiful as sycamore fig trees are in the lowlands. Solomon acquired horses from Egypt and from all the lands. The rest of the events of Solomon's reign, from start to finish, are recorded in the annals of Nathan the prophet, the prophecy of Ahijah the Shilonite, and the vision of Iddo the seer pertaining to Jeroboam son of Nebat. Solomon ruled over all Israel from Jerusalem for 40 years. Then Solomon passed away and was buried in the city of his father David. His son Rehoboam replaced him as king. Rehoboam traveled to Shechem, for all Israel had gathered in Shechem to make Rehoboam king. When Jeroboam son of Nebat heard the news, he was still in Egypt, where he had fled from King Solomon. Jeroboam returned from Egypt. They sent for him, and Jeroboam and all Israel came and spoke to Rehoboam, saying, "Your father made us work too hard. Now if you lighten the demands he made, and don't make us work as hard, we will serve you." He said to them, "Go away for 3 days, then return to me." So the people went away. King Rehoboam consulted with the older advisers who had served his father Solomon when he had been alive. He asked them, "How do you advise me to answer these people?" They said to him, "If you are fair to these people, grant their request, and are cordial to them, they will be your servants from this time forward." But Rehoboam rejected their advice and consulted the young advisers who served him, with whom he had grown up. He asked them, "How do you advise me to respond to these people who said to me, 'Lessen the demands your father placed upon us'?" The young advisers with whom Rehoboam had grown up said to him, "Say this to these people who have said to you, 'Your father made us work hard, but now lighten our burden.' Say this to them, 'I am a lot harsher than my father. My father imposed heavy demands on you. I will make them even heavier. My father punished you with ordinary whips. I will punish you with whips that really sting your flesh." Jeroboam and all the people reported to Rehoboam on the 3rd day, just as the king had ordered, when he said, "Return to me on the 3rd day." The king responded to the people harshly. He rejected the advice of the older men and followed the advice of the younger ones. He said, "My father imposed heavy demands on you. I will make them even heavier. My father punished you with ordinary whips. I will punish you with whips that really sting your flesh." The king refused to listen to the people because God was instigating this turn of events so that he might bring to pass the prophetic announcement he had made through Ahijah the Shilonite to Jeroboam son of Nebat. When all Israel saw that the king refused to listen to them, the people answered the king, "We have no portion in David, no share in the son of Jesse. Return to your homes, O Israel. Now look after your own dynasty, O David." So all Israel returned to their homes. Rehoboam continued to rule over the Israelites who lived in the cities of Judah. King Rehoboam sent Hadoram, the supervisor of the work crews, out after them, but the Israelites stoned him to death. King Rehoboam managed to jump in his chariot and escape to Jerusalem. So Israel has been in rebellion against the Davidic dynasty to this very day. Yeah, so you have a description of Solomon's activities and accomplishments here in the first um, yeah, something that's interesting to me is in 2 Chronicles chapter 8 verse 11, is that Solomon moved Pharaoh's daughter up from the city of David to the palace he had built for her. For he said, "My wife must not live in the palace of King David of Israel, for the places where the ark of the Lord has entered are holy." So, to me, this says that she wasn't converted to Judaism at all, that she was still essentially Egyptian and pagan. Yet Yet Solomon married her just the same. Clark says, is not this a proof that he considered his wife to be a heathen and not proper to dwell in a place which had been sanctified? Solomon had not yet departed from the true God. To build a house for Pharaoh's daughter outside the holy city is to open its gates sooner or later to Pharaoh's gods. Yeah. And elsewhere in the Kings, you see that Solomon's marriage to not only Pharaoh's daughter, but also to many other foreign women, led him astray, ultimately, so that he was building altars for gods of child sacrifice by the end of his reign. Yeah, you have a visit of the Queen of Sheba, and she was thoroughly impressed with Solomon's kingdom and his wealth and his wisdom and such. And he was making a great sum of money each year. 666 talents of gold per year. Which one commentator sets the value of the 666 talents of gold at 281 million some dollars per year. According to the 2016 price of gold, $1,269 an ounce, the value would be 1 billion some dollars a year. This speaks not only to the great wealth of Solomon, but it also makes him one of the only two people in the Bible associated with the number 666. The other biblical connection to 666 is the end times world dictator, an opponent of God and his people, often known as the Antichrist. In fact, the Revelation passage specifically says that the number 666 is the number of a man. Guzik says, this isn't to say that Solomon was the Antichrist, so that the coming Antichrist will be some weird reincarnation of Solomon, but it may indicate that the Antichrist may not be someone purely evil from the very beginning. Instead, he may be like Solomon, a good man corrupted. Yeah, the writer of Chronicles gives a subtle warning signal here. He assumes his readers knew the instructions for future kings of Israel in Deuteronomy 17:14 through 20. He assumed we know verse 17 of the passage, which says, "Nor shall he greatly multiply silver and gold for himself." God blessed Solomon with great riches, but Solomon allowed that blessing to turn into a danger because he disobediently multiplied silver and gold for himself. And just to reiterate here what that is, when you Deuteronomy 17:14 through 20, when you come to the land the Lord your God is giving you and take it over and live in it, and then say, I will select a king like all the nations surrounding me, you must select without fail a king whom the Lord your God chooses. From among your fellow citizens you must appoint a king. You may not designate a foreigner who is not one of your fellow Israelites. Moreover, he must not accumulate horses for himself, or allow the people to return to Egypt to do so, for the Lord has said you must never again return that way. Furthermore, he must not marry many wives, lest his affections turn aside, and he must not accumulate much silver and gold. When he sits on his royal throne, he must make a copy of this law, on a scroll given to him by the Levitical priests. It must be with him constantly, and he must read it as long as he lives, so that he may learn to revere the Lord his God, and observe all the words of this law and these statutes, and carry them out. Then he will not exalt himself above his fellow citizens, or turn from the commandments to the right or left, and he and his descendants will enjoy many years ruling over his kingdom in Israel. Yeah, but Solomon did all of these things. He must not accumulate horses for himself. He did that, or allow the people to return to Egypt to do so. He was specifically trading with Egypt for horses. Furthermore, he must not marry many wives, and he did that, lest his affections turned aside. And his affections turned aside. He must not accumulate much silver and gold. He definitely did that. No word on the law scroll, though. But I think the end of that is very interesting. Then he will not exalt himself above his fellow citizens, or turn from the commandments to the right or the left. That is, realize that he's just a manager of the Lord's affairs on earth, and not not any more or less worthy of praise than any of his other fellow citizens. Carrying on, Romans chapter 8, verses 9 through 21. You, however, are not in the flesh, but in the Spirit, if indeed the Spirit of God lives in you. Now, if anyone does not have the Spirit of Christ, this person does not belong to him. But if Christ is in you, your body is dead because of sin, but the Spirit is your life because of righteousness. Moreover, if the Spirit of the one who raised Jesus from the dead lives in you, the one who raised Christ from the dead will also make your mortal bodies alive through his Spirit who lives in you. So then, brothers and sisters, we are under obligation not to the flesh to live according to the flesh, for if you live according to the flesh, you will die. But if, by the Spirit, you put to death the deeds of the body, you will live. For all who are led by the Spirit of God are the sons of God. For you did not receive the spirit of slavery, leading again to fear, but you received the Spirit of adoption, by whom we cry, Abba, Father. The Spirit himself bears witness to our spirit that we are God's children. And if children, then heirs, namely heirs of God, and also fellow heirs with Christ, if indeed we suffer with him, so we may also be glorified with him. For I consider that our present sufferings cannot even be compared to the glory that will be revealed to us. For the creation eagerly waits for the revelation of the sons of God. For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of God, who subjected it in hope, that the creation itself will also be set free from the bondage of decay into the glorious freedom of God's children. 8 through 9. Yeah. Got it. Yeah, and I think this shows how if we have the Spirit of God, there's this obligation to remove sin from our lives. And it's pretty cool that God doesn't merely call us slaves, but sons. That is, we've received the Spirit of adoption by whom we cry, Abba, Father. Yeah, so pretty neat. Carrying on, Psalm chapter 18, verses 16 through 36. He reached down from above and took hold of me. He pulled me from the surging water. He rescued me from my strong enemy, from those who hate me, for they were too strong for me. They confronted me in my day of calamity, but the Lord helped me. He brought me out into a wide open place. He delivered me because he was pleased with me. The Lord repaid me for my godly deeds. He rewarded my blameless behavior. For I have obeyed the Lord's commands. I have not rebelled against my God. For I am aware of all his regulations, and I do not reject his rules. I was innocent before him, and kept myself from sinning. The Lord rewarded me for my godly deeds. He took notice of my blameless behavior. You prove to be loyal to one who is faithful. You prove to be trustworthy to one who is innocent. You prove to be reliable to one who is blameless, but you prove to be deceptive to one who is perverse. For you deliver oppressed people, but you bring down those who have a proud look. Indeed, you are my lamp, Lord. My God illuminates the darkness around me. Indeed, with your help I can charge against an army. By my God's power I can jump over a wall. The one true God acts in a faithful manner. The Lord's promise is reliable. He is a shield to all who take shelter in him. Indeed, who is God besides the Lord? Who is a protector besides our God? The one true God gives me strength. He removes the obstacles in my way. He gives me the agility of a deer. He enables me to negotiate the rugged terrain. He trains my hands for battle. My arms can bend even the strongest bow. You give me your protective shield. Your right hand supports me. Your willingness to help enables me to prevail. You widen my path. My feet do not slip. Yeah. And finally, Proverbs chapter 19, verse 26. The one who robs his father and chases away his mother is a son who brings shame and disgrace. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining me today. Hope you have a good day.